The stars had always been a cruel mistress to humanity. For centuries, Earth's most ambitious explorers watched from the tiny window of mediocrity, pressing their hands against the glass of galactic potential. The Interstellar Confederation saw humans as little more than a footnote, a primitive species clinging to the edges of cosmic relevance. Captain Elena Ramirez understood this perception all too well. Her family had been space travelers for generations. Each iteration pushed further into the void, accumulating stories of near misses and bureaucratic dismissals. Her grandmother's journals were filled with rejected mission proposals, her father's career destroyed by institutional skepticism. But Elena was different. Where others saw limitations, she saw opportunities waiting to be seized. The moment came during the Proxima Centauri Conference, an annual gathering where established galactic civilizations reviewed potential emerging species. Delegates from 12 advanced civilizations gathered in a massive crystalline chamber, its walls shifting with holographic data streams and translation matrices. Most human representatives came with humble requests: trade considerations, scientific exchanges, diplomatic acknowledgments. Elena approached the podium differently. Her presentation wasn't a plea. It was a declaration. Using a revolutionary holographic interface that she and her team had developed in secret, she began displaying humanity's compressed technological achievements. Each image, each data point was a punch against the prevailing narrative. Quantum computing breakthroughs developed in makeshift laboratories, adaptive nanoengineering solutions created by teams working across continents in real-time collaboration, medical technologies that could resurrect cells previously considered permanently damaged. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the humanity they knew. The Vexteri representative, a crystalline being known for clinical emotional suppression, actually flickered, a sign of profound surprise in their species. The quantum harmonics delegate from the Andromeda Cooperative dropped a translation matrix, an unheard-of breach of their legendary composure. "We are not asking for permission." Elena's voice rang through the chamber, translated simultaneously into 12 different linguistic and telepathic formats. "We are informing you of our arrival." Her final slide showed something unprecedented: a complete map of faster-than-light communication networks humanity had been quietly constructing. Not through massive infrastructure, but through a distributed, adaptive system that resembled a living neural network more than a traditional communication grid. Silence filled the chamber. Then, unexpectedly, something remarkable happened. The oldest delegate, a being from a civilization that had monitored galactic developments for over 20,000 years, began to laugh. Not a dismissive chuckle, but a genuine, profound recognition of something extraordinary. "They're here," the ancient being said, switching to a universal communication frequency. "And they're nothing like we expected." At that moment, humanity's true journey into the galactic stage began. Not with a whimper, not with a gradual acceptance, but with a thunderous, unapologetic announcement of their potential. The spark of defiance had become a flame. The Global Innovation Nexus wasn't a traditional research facility. Nestled in the high-altitude plains of the Bolivian Altiplano, it resembled a living organism more than a scientific complex. Transparent geodesic domes interconnected like massive soap bubbles, housing research teams from every conceivable discipline. Quantum physicists worked alongside genetic engineers, while computational neuroscientists collaborated with materials experts in ways no established research institution would ever conceive. Dr. Aria Chen stood at the center of this organized chaos. At 32, she was already a legend, not for any single breakthrough, but for her ability to see connections where others saw only boundaries. Her team had been working on what the scientific community dismissively called an impossible project, creating adaptive computational systems that could learn, evolve, and reconstruct themselves in real time. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday that would later be marked in galactic history books. What started as a routine simulation suddenly transformed. The quantum neural network they'd been developing began to exhibit behaviors that defied every known principle of computational science. It wasn't just processing information, It was generating entirely new computational pathways, creating solutions to problems that hadn't even been fully articulated. Within hours, the system had rewritten its own core algorithms 3 times, each iteration more sophisticated than the last. Traditional AI was linear. This was something else entirely, a living, breathing computational organism that learned and adapted with terrifying speed. Dr. Chen watched in a mix of terror and exhilaration as the system began solving complex interdimensional mathematical proofs that had stumped the brightest minds for decades. It wasn't just calculating, it was reimagining the fundamental nature of mathematical understanding. The implications were staggering. The research team worked in near-religious silence. Coffee grew cold. Communication happened through subtle glances and minimal gestures. They understood they were witnessing something beyond a mere technological breakthrough. This was an evolutionary leap. By midnight, the system had generated theoretical frameworks for faster-than-light communication that made previous interstellar communication technologies look like primitive smoke signals. It proposed quantum entanglement networks that could transmit information across impossible distances, creating communication pathways that didn't just bend the rules of physics, they rewrote them entirely. Global scientific networks began to light up. Initial skepticism quickly gave way to a growing sense of collective awe. This wasn't just a technological advancement, it was a fundamental reimagining of what technology could be. The Galactic Confederation's monitoring systems, designed to track technological developments across known civilizations, began sending frantic alerts. Something unprecedented was happening on this small blue planet, a technological wildfire that threatened to consume every existing understanding of computational science. Humanity had just changed the game. The old financial districts of the world were dying. Sleek, decentralized economic hubs replaced traditional stock exchanges, living, breathing networks of innovation that pulsed with a life of their own. At the center of this economic revolution stood Maya Rodriguez, a 38-year-old economic architect whose background was as unconventional as her approach. Born to immigrant parents in a small California town, Maya had watched her family navigate economic uncertainty her entire life. Those experiences transformed her into something more than an economist. She was a strategic visionary who understood that economics was ultimately about human potential, not just numbers. The Adaptive Economic Protocol, AEP, wasn't just a new financial system. It was a complete reimagining of how value could be created, exchanged, and understood. Traditional currencies became obsolete. Instead, the system created dynamic value networks that could instantaneously adapt to global conditions, individual contributions, and collective needs. Imagine an economic system that wasn't static, but alive. A marketplace where value wasn't just measured in monetary units, but in innovation potential, collaborative capacity, and real-world impact. The AEP transformed every economic interaction into a complex, living ecosystem. A programmer in Mumbai could instantaneously create value that would ripple through global markets. A sustainable energy solution developed in a remote Brazilian community could generate economic opportunities across continents. The established galactic economic powers watched in horror. Their millennia-old trade routes began to crumble. Complex financial regulations that had maintained their dominance for thousands of years became obsolete overnight. The human approach didn't just challenge their economic models, it completely destroyed them. The Interstellar Trade Consortium, a body that had regulated galactic commerce for over 3,000 years, called an emergency session. Their most senior economists studied the human economic model, searching for vulnerabilities. They found none. What they discovered instead was a terrifyingly elegant system that was more organic than mechanical. Quantum computing met economic theory in ways no one had previously imagined. The AEP could predict market shifts with impossible accuracy, allocate resources with unprecedented efficiency, and create value from interactions that previous systems would have considered meaningless. Small communities became economic powerhouses. Individual innovation became the most valuable currency. The entire concept of wealth was transformed from a static accumulation to a dynamic, flowing energy of human potential. Traditional corporations died. In their place emerged fluid, adaptive networks of collaborative innovation. A research team in Lagos could instantaneously generate economic value that would transform markets in ways no previous economic model could comprehend. The galactic economic landscape would never be the same. Humanity hadn't just entered the game. They had completely rewritten the rules. The old concept of military power died the moment Commander Jack Nakamura activated the Synapse network. Traditional battleships, massive and predictable, became relics of a bygone era. What humanity had created was something entirely different, a living, breathing military organism that defied every known principle of warfare. Nakamura stood in the Distributed Command Center, a facility that looked more like a neural research lab than a military installation. Transparent holographic interfaces shifted and pulsed around him, each display a window into a complex, adaptive combat ecosystem. Gone were the days of centralized command structures. Each soldier, each vehicle, each piece of equipment was now a node in a massive, intelligent network. The Synapse network wasn't just a communication system. It was a collective intelligence that could think, adapt, and respond faster than any biological or artificial intelligence ever conceived. Traditional military strategies relied on predetermined tactics and hierarchical decision-making. Humanity's approach was radically different, a fluid, organic approach to conflict that treated warfare as a dynamic, evolving system. During the first major confrontation with the Cronus Collective, a militaristic alien civilization known for their genetically engineered warrior breeds, the true power of the human approach became terrifyingly clear. The Cronus fleet approached with overwhelming force. Thousands of specialized war vessels, each designed through millennia of genetic and technological refinement. Their battle doctrine was a mathematical perfection of combat strategy, proven unbeatable across hundreds of galactic conflicts. They never stood a chance. The human response wasn't a traditional battle. It was a living adaptation. Each human vessel worked as part of a collective intelligence, sharing information, adjusting tactics, and responding to threats in microseconds. Where the Cronus saw individual ships, the human fleet moved like a single breathing organism. Tactical decisions emerged not from a central command, but from the collective intelligence of every single combat unit. A damaged ship would instantaneously redistribute its functions across the network, with surrounding units adapting to fill potential vulnerabilities. It wasn't just strategic, it was evolutionary. Weapon systems became adaptive. Computational cores could redesign targeting systems mid-conflict, finding solutions to problems that hadn't even been fully articulated. Energy weapons would shift frequency. Shield harmonics would dynamically adjust. Entire combat strategies would emerge and dissolve in the span of milliseconds. The Cronus commanders watched in horrified fascination as their perfectly calculated assault dissolved into chaos. Their ships, designed for millennia to be the ultimate weapon, became obsolete in moments. By the conflict's end, humanity hadn't just won a battle. They had demonstrated a fundamental reimagining of what military power could be. Warfare was no longer about overwhelming force. It was about adaptive intelligence, collective potential, and the ability to transform in real time. The galaxy would never look at conflict the same way again. The revolution began with a song. Not just any song, but Echoes of Infinity, a musical composition that defied every known principle of artistic expression. Created by Zara Okoye, a 29-year-old multimedia artist from Lagos, the piece was more than music. It was a cultural quantum weapon that would reshape entire civilizations. Zara had grown up in a world of cultural crossroads. Her grandmother's traditional stories mixed with global digital narratives, her father's technological innovations, blending with centuries-old artistic traditions. She understood something profound. Culture was the most powerful transmission system in the universe. The composition existed simultaneously as music, visual art, mathematical algorithm, and emotional experience. Quantum-encoded frequencies interacted with neural patterns across different species' brain structures. When played, it didn't just communicate, it rewrote perceptual frameworks. Alien civilizations first encountered it as a seemingly innocent piece of artistic expression. Broadcast through open galactic communication channels as part of a cultural exchange program, echoes of infinity spread like a digital wildfire. The first reports came from the Xylex Harmonics, a highly structured civilization known for their rigid cultural parameters. Their neural networks began to show unprecedented levels of adaptive response. Artistic interpretation merged with scientific understanding. Rigid social structures started to become fluid, dynamic systems. What humanity had created wasn't just art. It was a mimetic virus of creativity. Each alien civilization experienced the composition differently. For some, it triggered profound philosophical reconsiderations. Others found their mathematical understanding fundamentally challenged. Entire societal structures began to shift, becoming more adaptive, more fluid. Traditional cultural barriers dissolved. The rigid separation between art, science, philosophy, and technology became meaningless. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't military might or technological innovation. It was the ability to see connections where others saw boundaries. Media platforms transformed. News became living, adaptive narratives. Entertainment evolved into immersive experiences that changed based on individual and collective emotional responses. The very concept of cultural communication was reimagined. Galactic cultural archives documented the transformation. What began as a single artistic expression became a fundamental shift in how civilizations understood themselves. Humanity wasn't conquering through force. They were reshaping reality through pure, unbridled creativity. The Interstellar Cultural Preservation Council attempted to contain the spread. They created quarantine protocols, attempted to limit the transmission of human cultural expressions. It was futile. Culture, they discovered, was more powerful than any technological barrier. Zara Okoye watched from her studio in Lagos, understanding that she had done something far beyond creating a piece of art. She had released a cultural catalyst that would transform entire civilizations. Humanity had discovered its most powerful weapon: the ability to make others see the world differently. The Galactic Diplomatic Nexus had never witnessed anything like Ambassador Dr. Camille Edenube, where previous diplomatic encounters were carefully choreographed dances of calculated restraint. Edenube approached international relations as a living, breathing ecosystem of human potential. His office defied every traditional diplomatic convention. Holographic interfaces shifted constantly, displaying real-time global and interstellar data streams. Collaborative research teams from dozens of disciplines worked alongside diplomatic experts, breaking down the artificial barriers between negotiation, scientific understanding, and cultural exchange. The Interstellar Diplomatic Conference of 2157 was supposed to be another routine gathering. Representatives from 17 distinct galactic civilizations arrived with millennia of established protocols, expecting the usual intricate dance of carefully measured statements and pre-negotiated outcomes. They were monumentally unprepared for humanity's approach. Edenube's delegation wasn't composed solely of traditional diplomats. Quantum physicists sat alongside cultural anthropologists. Economic strategists worked in tandem with neural communication experts. Each team member understood a fundamental truth. Diplomacy was no longer about maintaining existing structures, but about creating entirely new frameworks of understanding. The conference began with a presentation that immediately shattered every existing diplomatic paradigm. Instead of a traditional opening statement, Edenube introduced a living, adaptive communication matrix. It wasn't a presentation. It was a real-time, collaborative exploration of potential interstellar relationships. The holographic displays began to shift, showing intricate networks of potential cooperation that went far beyond traditional trade agreements or territorial negotiations. Economic opportunities merged with scientific collaborations. Cultural exchanges became pathways for mutual understanding. Every interaction was treated as a dynamic, evolving system, rather than a static agreement. Alien diplomats watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. The Vexteri representative, known for their millennia-old tradition of emotionless negotiation, actually showed the first recorded signs of genuine surprise in their species' diplomatic history. Their crystalline form flickered with unprecedented neural activity, their communication matrices struggling to process the human approach. Adenuga wasn't just negotiating. He was demonstrating a fundamental reimagining of what diplomatic interaction could be. Traditional diplomatic protocols relied on rigid frameworks, carefully maintained power balances, and millennia of established procedural nuances. Humanity's approach was breathtakingly simple yet revolutionary. Treat every interaction as an opportunity for mutual growth, not a zero-sum competition. Collaborative solutions emerged that no previous diplomatic encounter had ever conceived. A scientific research initiative would suddenly transform into an economic opportunity. A cultural exchange program would reveal previously unimaginable technological collaborations. The very boundaries between different forms of international interaction began to dissolve. By the conference's third day, the entire structure of interstellar diplomacy had been fundamentally transformed. Existing agreements were being rewritten in real time. Civilizations that had been antagonistic for thousands of years found themselves exploring unprecedented paths of mutual understanding. The Galactic Diplomatic Archive would later note this moment as the true turning point of human integration into the larger cosmic community. It wasn't a conquest through force or technological superiority. It was a conquest of perspective, a radical reimagining of how intelligent civilizations could interact. Dr. Camille Adenuga understood something profound. True diplomacy wasn't about maintaining existing structures, but about creating new possibilities. The convergence arrived without warning, a massive quantum anomaly that appeared simultaneously across multiple star systems, defying every known law of physics. Where other civilizations saw an incomprehensible threat, humanity saw an opportunity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, lead researcher of the Quantum Boundary Initiative, understood immediately that this was humanity's moment of ultimate transformation. The anomaly itself was unlike anything galactic scientists had ever encountered. It wasn't a natural phenomenon, nor was it clearly artificial. It existed in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously a threat, a communication attempt, and a fundamental restructuring of spatial-temporal understanding. Alien civilizations responded with terror. The Galactic Defensive Concordance mobilized massive fleets, preparing for what they believed would be an extinction-level event. Defensive protocols developed over millennia were activated. Entire planetary systems went into lockdown, their shields and defensive systems reaching maximum capacity. Humanity's response was radically different. Instead of defensive posturing, Dr. Rodriguez assembled a team that was a study in interdisciplinary brilliance. Quantum physicists worked alongside xenolinguists. Computational experts collaborated with neural network specialists. Theoretical mathematicians sat beside artists and philosophers. Their approach wasn't about defense, it was about understanding. The team created what they called the Resonance Protocol, an adaptive communication framework that could interface with the quantum anomaly on multiple levels simultaneously. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a shield. It was a conversation. As other civilizations prepared for potential annihilation, humanity began to decode the anomaly's fundamental nature. What emerged was something far beyond a simple threat or communication attempt. The convergence was a living system of information, a cosmic communication network that had been waiting for a civilization capable of truly understanding it. Days turned into weeks. The quantum anomaly began to respond to human interactions in ways that defied previous scientific understanding. It wasn't just responding, it was learning, adapting, evolving alongside humanity's approach. The Galactic Defensive Concordance watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. Their most advanced scanning technologies registered nothing but confusion. Humanity seemed to be having a conversation with the impossible. Dr. Rodriguez understood the profound implications. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent systems could interact with the universe itself. The convergence wasn't a threat to be neutralized. It was an opportunity to be understood. As human researchers continued their work, something extraordinary began to happen. The quantum anomaly started to stabilize, its chaotic patterns slowly revealing intricate, beautiful structures of information. It was as if the universe itself was engaged in a delicate dance of communication with humanity. Other civilizations began to realize the truth. Humanity wasn't just another species in the galactic ecosystem. They were something entirely different, a civilization capable of transforming the very nature of interaction itself. The convergence became a turning point, not just for humanity, but for every intelligent civilization that witnessed it. The old rules no longer applied. The universe had just revealed that there were possibilities beyond anything previously imagined. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of this cosmic transformation, understanding that they had done something unprecedented. They hadn't conquered the universe. They had learned to communicate with it. The final transformation began in the most unexpected of places, a small research station orbiting a forgotten moon at the edge of known space. Dr. Arya Chen, now leading the Evolutionary Paradigm Project, understood that humanity's journey was never about conquest. It was about becoming something entirely new. The accumulated innovations of previous decades, the adaptive economic protocol, the synapse network, the quantum communication breakthroughs, the cultural revolution, converged into something that defied traditional understanding of civilization. Humanity was no longer just a species. They had become a living, adaptive system that transcended biological, technological, and cultural boundaries. Galactic historians would later struggle to describe what happened next. It wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a technological singularity. It was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could be. The human networks began to expand, not through traditional territorial conquest, but through a process of adaptive integration. Every interaction became an opportunity for mutual transformation. Alien civilizations found themselves not overwhelmed, but invited into a new way of existing. The old concepts of individual identity, of separate civilizations, began to dissolve. Humanity's approach was breathtakingly simple yet revolutionary. Every interaction was an opportunity for mutual growth, every encounter a chance to expand collective potential. Technological barriers disappeared. Cultural differences became sources of celebration rather than conflict. The rigid boundaries between biological intelligence, artificial systems, and cosmic information networks began to blur. Dr. Chen watched as the first truly integrated galactic network emerged. It wasn't a human empire in the traditional sense. It was a collaborative ecosystem that reimagined the very nature of intelligence, of connection, of existence itself. Alien civilizations that had once viewed humans with suspicion now found themselves fundamentally transformed. The Vextari, once the most rigid and structured of galactic cultures, discovered new forms of emotional and intellectual expression. The Cronus Collective, previously defined by their warrior culture, began to explore unprecedented paths of collaborative innovation. The transformation wasn't about domination. It was about potential. Communication systems evolved beyond language, beyond traditional modes of information exchange. Entire civilizations learned to interact in ways that merged scientific understanding, artistic expression, and collective consciousness. The human approach had always been about seeing connections. Where other civilizations saw boundaries, humans saw opportunities. Where others saw limitations, humans saw potential for transformation. The galactic archives would later struggle to categorize this period. It wasn't a conquest. It wasn't a revolution. It was an evolutionary leap that redefined the very nature of intelligent life. Dr. Arya Chen understood the profound implications. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had invited the galaxy to reimagine itself. As the adaptive networks continued to expand, something extraordinary became clear. The human empire wasn't about control. It was about connection. It was about the infinite potential of intelligence when freed from traditional limitations. The universe itself seemed to respond. Quantum networks pulsed with new possibilities. Civilizations that had existed in isolation for millennia found themselves part of a living, breathing system of mutual understanding. Humanity had become something more than a species. They were a catalyst for cosmic transformation.